Day was July 25th, the feast day of St. James, Apostle. St. James, called the Greater, preached the gospel in Judea, Samaria, and Spain. On his return to Jerusalem, Herod condemned him to death. He was beheaded in 42. His body was conveyed to Compostela in Spain and is venerated by many pilgrims. All the angels and saints, please pray for us. Welcome, my name is Dana. These are my Catholic memoirs. So on this day, I was going in for spiritual direction, and I realized that my priest hadn't been there at the time that I was there for my appointment. So I ended up having to look for the other parish priest. So we have two different kinds of priests at our parish, where one is like the Novus Ordo priest, and then we have three other priests who are the priests who celebrate the Tridentine Latin Mass and the Byzantine Rite. So we do celebrate three of the different three of the different masses at our parish. But when I went to reach out to the Novus Ordo priest, he helped me locate my priest. And it turns out I wasn't supposed to be meeting at the parish office. I was supposed to be meeting at the monastery, and I did not know that. So fortunately, I was able to find the monastery, and my priest was able to get me. But before that, I was even like, I was just trying to prepare for confession and reading all the prayers just to like calm my nerves. I don't know if this is how other people feel during confession, but I always feel nervous and like I get like the butterflies, so I get a little bit of anxiety. I'm not sure why, but that's usually how it is for confession for me. So it takes me a lot of strength to get through it, but it's definitely always worth it and it feels like a great accomplishment whenever I do. And my spiritual direction I didn't get to go through all of the things that I wanted to go through. And I had actually planned all the things that I had actually taken the time to prepare for this spiritual guidance, because I remember the other two times that I went for spiritual direction, it was like all over the place, very unstructured, and I would I would lose track of what I wanted to do, or I wouldn't get through the things I truly wanted to ask questions for. So I decided I wanted for this one to prepare properly, and it made me think of like what would be the best things that I could do to make the most out of spiritual guidance. So, and what spiritual guidance is just like a meeting with a priest, and you can get spiritual direction from them and ask them any of the questions that you have regarding faith, or if you have any help with guidance on how to overcome any sins that are repeated, or any help with your vocation. They are there to help support you and give you instruction on church teaching and the Catholic perspective of all that. So for me, I like to go at least once a month. That is my ultimate goal. And just always like continue contemplating and thinking about what I want to do to further improve on my faith. So because of those two instances where I felt like I was all over the place, I came prepared this time, and I wanted to share the steps that I did that I thought would be useful for making the most out of spiritual direction. So the first half is preparation, and the first one is really just making the call and setting up an appointment. And usually it would be calling your parish secretary and setting up an appointment. And it really depends on how busy the priest you want to go in for spiritual guidance with, how busy they are, and it can be anywhere from as soon as possible to even weeks or months out. So turns out my spiritual director was unavailable until September, and I didn't want to wait that long, so I went to ask another priest, which is going to be a successor. So I thought that was a good choice to ask, and I set up an appointment and was able to come in the following week. So that was actually very, very quick. But as far as a good rule of thumb for setting those up, I usually try to set it up on the first Friday. I always think of, the first Friday devotion. I should go call up and set an appointment with my spiritual director. So that is like one way to give me a reminder, and it's easy to put down on a calendar, just like first Friday, schedule spiritual direction. Then the second part of preparation is around I would aim for at least like 3 days in advance. I would try to do preparation for confession. So I would do an examination of conscience, just to sort out and figure out like how many mortal sins have been committed, how many venial sins have been, or like what venial sins have become like repeated offenses, and any patterns of things that would be worth bringing to confession. So the preparation for confession is really important, because at least for me, I like to spend the time during spiritual guidance to get a proper a confession with my spiritual director, because I like to have my spiritual director and my confessor be one person. And it might be interesting, or some people might prefer actually going to the confessional, which I also don't mind going to the confessional too. But I learned that from having a confessor and continually going to them keeps like a record, and they're like more able to tailor their help, knowing like your sins, like your history of repeated sins that you keep falling towards. So it's nice to have that, like a person who knows you that well and be able to guide you, compared to like a confessional where it's anonymous, so it's not like they can really tailor it as well as being able to see them in person. So after that, the third part of preparation is really just being able to follow through and go to confession. And I actually have a hard time with that, or not confession, go to the spiritual direction appointment. And that can be the most difficult for me sometimes. I'm not depending on like how busy my life is, or how stressed or anxious I am, especially managing like work and family. So it's just doing my best to go and show up, because I know in the end, like even if I have any anxieties or fears, or I'm worried about confession, which I'm hoping it's normal for people to get anxiety and worry about confession, but because it's just so personal and very very revealing, to kind of lay down all of those things that you had made mistakes with. I That's where I find it difficult even to follow through with spiritual guidance. So that is the third part of preparation, which is to just follow through and go and not cancel the appointment. And then, so the other questions, as far as being actually at the spiritual direction meeting, is having confession. That's usually the first thing I start off with. I always ask the priest if he would be willing to hear my confession, and priests are usually always. I don't think I've ever had a priest ever turn me down. So I think it's the hardest part to do, but also one of the most important things to get out of the way, unless you're in a state of grace still. So at least if I was still in a state of grace, then I wouldn't need to go in for confession. But most of the times I would need to go in to start with confession. And as far as preparation for confession, I should have mentioned that I actually use the prayer book, Blessed Be God. This is a traditional, more of like a traditional prayer book. So it has some of the older, right? It's published a fairly long time before Vatican II. So the original publication was in 1959. But they have a section here which is devotion for confession, and I just read everything from the entire chapter all the way through. And it just goes through everything from the examination of conscience, all the entire all the commandments, against the table of sins and capital sins, and then it gives you specific prayers for each part of the confession for preparation and thanksgiving. And this has been very helpful because just knowing that I can just go through the entire chapter and complete that is really, it just makes it easy to stay focused and stay structured with keeping with confession. But then in this last spiritual guidance section, I was just already flustered because I was late and everything, or because there was like the miscommunication with the location and tracking down the father. So I also like needed a little bit of help to figure out where I was with the steps in confession. And the priest is usually pretty friendly and very helpful with that. So there is that. And as far as topics that are good to discuss, which I do after confession, and this can be like whatever is the most important. I don't think there's any real structure of how I do this, but the important topics that I think are really helpful would be to bring up any sins or repeated sins that are becoming a pattern and to try to get guidance on how to work through them. And usually the priest is very helpful with that. So that would be the first step. And the other subject would be to get guidance on any questions that I have with Catholic teaching. So, um, so, so yeah, that I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Like, if you have any questions about like, oh, guardian angels, or how to get like nihil obstat and or imprimatur. I'm hoping that I'm saying that properly. Which is actually was what I was hoping to ask my spiritual director for this last meeting, but we ran out of time, even with just doing confession and asking some questions. But yeah, I was hoping to ask for guidance on like getting imprimaturs because or a nihil obstat, because I have some publications. This is the planner that I'm reading out of. Well, this is the hardcover version, but I've had published my own version of a planner in here, and I just haven't felt like that I should like fully I don't know, advertise. I don't know what the right term is. Like fully like spread or like distribute it, because it doesn't have the nihil obstat from my bishop. So I wanted to get direction from my priest about that. Someone had asked me through email if I am getting permission from my bishop and if I'm in alignment with them, especially with social media. So I thought that was a good question. And like other publications that I've made is like, this is a picture book for the Mass, and just like a daily journal, a blank journal. So those I am looking to, I'm probably going to figure out a way to get the approval from my archbishop, or at least his office, for those. But like, that's an example of something that would be like a good topic to ask, or within like Catholic teaching, or any guidance, any questions that you have about the faith. And the last thing that I thought was a good thing to ask, would be important to ask, would be who to pray for in your life. And at least for me, I always think of like family, or people I ran into. Usually it's family, or like if they have any health issues, I just ask the priest to pray for them, and he'll usually like remember their name or have a list and remember them in his prayers. So those are the main things during spiritual guidance that I would cover, which would be having confession first. Second, discussing any repeated sins and working through them, getting his guidance on them. The third would be any Catholic teachings, questions about the faith that he could instruct me on. and the last being prayers, people who he could pray for and who are in my life that he could pray for. And then after spiritual direction is kind of like the follow-up. So since usually I do confession, we usually get penance for that, and I usually go to the, if I have time, which this time I did, I usually go to the church to pray and receive my, or like fulfill my penance. And this time it was to do a Hail Mary for each of the sorrows of Mater Dolorosa, which is Our Lady of Sorrows. He even quizzed me. He was like, "Do you know how many sorrows she has?" And I was like, 7. So he was happy. So yeah, I prayed the 7 Hail Marys, and what I also do with my penance is to pray another set of them. I do my penance twice. One for myself as thanksgiving for receiving forgiveness, and the others another time. So I would do the penance again for my priest because they need all of our prayers, and it's just the least that we can do to help them, especially if they do our confession, to pray our penance again for the priest. So because it was Friday, there was also adoration. I'm still learning about adoration. I did spend a little bit of time, like 15 minutes there to pray and go through the rest of the Thanksgiving prayers in Blessed Be God, because there are devotions for after confession, which is all about prayers of thanksgiving. So it's like a couple pages long too. Yeah. So yeah, I would go through this, and then at the very end it says, "The penance given in confession may be said now." So that is a good way to wrap up the confession obligation. And then yes, just purpose to not repeat the sins again, and just continue to do my best until the next time for spiritual direction. But yeah, I'm sorry that was all over the place and pretty lengthy, but I thought this was going to be helpful. And I appreciate you for being here all the way to the very end. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear your experiences with how you prepare for spiritual direction or even confession. I think we can all learn from each other just from our experiences, and I'm always happy to learn from how people who are further along in their faith are doing. So thank you for joining, and I hope to see you in the next one. God bless.